Fantastic. Well, let us start out with the tweet from about an hour ago, indicating that you feel like Ron DeSantis should be maybe a little more proactive. We don't have an indictment yet for the former president, but you think he should be more out front about what might or might not happen if there is one and if the president's in Florida?
I think Ron DeSantis missed a real opportunity for leadership. There's an increasing Sorosization of the political prosecutions that we've seen, and I don't believe that the criminal justice system ought to intersect with politics. But here you have Alvin Bragg in what is clearly a political endeavor, wanting to drag President Trump before a New York court. Governor DeSantis would have an ability to step in and fight against that extradition. He's choosing not to, and I think it's a missed opportunity.
Is it a missed opportunity yet, though, if there's no indictment and no push for extradition? The governor, I was in the room with him when he said, hey, I just want to stay away from the sideshow and see what plays out. Don't want to jump in a circus ahead of time.
Well, oftentimes leadership can have a deterrent effect against bad decisions. And so if Governor DeSantis expressed that it would be a fight if Alvin Bragg took this step, we may be able to spare the country and really the world what's going to be a very bad day for the country. We don't want to see our former presidents dragged before courts on trumped up charges. We don't want to see misdemeanors converted into felonies. We don't want to see DAs ignore crimes on their own streets while then trying to virtue signal for the sake of politics. If Ron DeSantis had come out at that event and said that he would not allow the extradition of President Trump to New York, I think that would have been a very good thing, and I think it would have reduced the likelihood of charges from Alvin Bragg.
On another angle of this developing story, there was the president's request a few days ago that his supporters protest. After January 6th, how responsible was it for him to ask people to protest about something that may or may not be happening to him?
Well, protest is an essential feature of the republic. Protest is how people are able to express their views, often to not devolve into violence. I'm for peaceful protest. I do not believe anyone should be engaging in political violence in our country on the right or on the left. The fact that we had a riot at the Capitol on January 6th was terrible. It was a terrible day, and it's not something we ever want to see in any part of our country. But certainly people expressing their views through protest peacefully can be important to our political dialogue and discourse.
Very well. Let's talk to the legislation that you are proposing around the FBI. What's the onus of this? Why are you so concerned? It looks like you've gotten some people to back you already.
Yeah, House Republicans are joining me. I actually just added a few co-sponsors on the walk over to have this discussion. We do not want a new FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., larger than the Pentagon. Think about that. A lot of the political capture that's occurred with the FBI hasn't occurred out in the country or out in the world. It's principally occurred in New York and in Washington, D.C., where politics dominates thinking. We have a lot of brave FBI agents working to keep us safe in Miami, in Texas, all over the world. And I think if we decentralized power out of Washington and enhanced capabilities elsewhere, that would serve the needs of our fellow Americans without seeing this rot of politics impacting decisions that really ought to be made based on the facts and the law.
And if there is rot inside the FBI, if it's being weaponized, and if leaders in the FBI are complicit in being weaponized, will changing location or size of headquarters really deal with the problem? What else might have to be done to, in your words, bring the FBI to heel?
I think we're going to have to limit some of the authorities that the FBI has abused. I would likely start with the FISA authority. This is the opportunity for the government to go before secret courts to get the ability to spy on people. And oftentimes, innocent Americans are caught in that dragnet in the absence of any due process. Matter of fact, when the Department of Justice's own Inspector General reviewed those authorities in 28 cases, they found out that in all 28 cases, there was a lack of adherence to the protocols and procedures that provide any semblance of due process and protection for people who are unfairly targeted. So I think it's really a three-pronged approach. Don't build a new headquarters in Washington, D.C., limit the authorities that have been abused, and then limit the funding for operations that have been converted to politics. The Foreign Influence Task Force, that sounds good, but in fact that group largely ended up doing the dust busting or the plumbing for the Biden administration when they had derogatory information coming in about their foreign dealings and the potential compromise of the first family.
Let's move to people's pocketbooks, if we could, for a second, with the unfolding of the SVB and what some are now calling a financial crisis, no matter what anybody else wants to call it. What's your concern? How big is your concern about mid-sized banks, regional banks? And oh, by the way, is your money in the bank?
My money, such that I have any, is in the bank. What I can tell you is that my concern revolves around Joe Biden nationalizing the banking system without even a vote of American lawmakers. There has to be risk associated with the banking enterprise, and if there isn't, you get moral hazard, you get bad decisions. And when Joe Biden just said that all of the deposits at Silicon Valley Bank were guaranteed by the federal government, that creates a new precedent, a new standard where every deposit in America is fully secured. And so bank managers who are driven by quarterly profits and by quarterly stock prices can make really bad short-term decisions hoping to get a high-end return. And if that doesn't happen, then there'll be the backfill of the U.S. taxpayer supporting everybody's deposits. And when you drain risk out of the banking system for the investors, for the management, then you get a terrible moral hazard that marches us closer to socialism. I mean, this is not the first time a government has nationalized banking, and in virtually every circumstance where that has happened, you see rising inflation, a devaluation of currency on the back end.
Fair enough. And one more on finance, because something that I don't think the mainstream is talking about are the many pension systems across the U.S. that may be just as upside down in their T-bills and other investments as anybody else is. And one could argue that the impact of interest rates is only beginning to be felt. How concerned are you about pension funds across the U.S. and what could be done to protect some of those workers who stand to lose money?
Now, I am very concerned about this. Thank you for raising it. And these are the funds that support the retirements of our teachers and firefighters and police, first responders. And the reality is we have over $1.5 trillion in unfunded pension liability in our country right now. And that is why it enrages me so much that U.S. taxpayers are securing the pension funds of Ukrainian officials, of Ukrainian politicians, while the brave people who are our teachers and police and first responders don't have that same security. So the first thing I do is stop funding the pensions of governments overseas before being concerned about our own pensions. But you make a more specific point regarding this financial crisis, and if there are a lot of these pension assets in long-term treasury bonds, they may very well see the same squeeze that we've seen some of our mid-sized banks face.
Yeah, definitely one to watch. To wrap it up, we talked last time about how you'd like to see the presidential situation unfold over the coming year and a half, but just assuming that it doesn't go exactly the way you plan and that Governor DeSantis ends up in the Oval Office, there's going to be a vacancy in Florida. And, going to these political things from time to time, I hear whispers. They say, who would step into that role? Is that something you would ever be interested in pursuing? Would that be an up move, a down move, a lateral move? What do you think?
Well, I told your colleague Sue Strawn recently that I have no plans to run for anything but re-election. I love the bosses that I have between Highway 331 and the Alabama line out in Perdido Key, and those are the only folks I'm planning to work for. And I love my job. I love the chance to serve the people of Northwest Florida, and I have no plans to seek any other office.
Well, she didn't set me up for that one, but we'll keep asking just in case you change your mind. Anything else, Representative Gaetz, that is right up front on your mind today that you want people here to know, or have we covered the main bases?
Yes. Well, the Congress today is scheduled to prepare votes on the Parents' Bill of Rights. And that sounds like something that most conservatives would want to support, but I have to be honest with you, my dad was on the school board, and I didn't run for Congress to be a member of America's school board. So I will be voting against the Republican bill to establish a Parents' Bill of Rights because I don't want to strengthen the Federal Department of Education. I want to abolish the Federal Department of Education. I don't want Congress more involved in the decisions in local school districts. I want the Congress less less involved. And where there are places where they're pushing woke ideology or bad curriculum, I actually don't think it's appropriate for the federal government to step in. I think local communities have to stand up and fight like they did in Loudoun County, Virginia, electing new school boards, getting parents more involved through the local political process, not trying to shoehorn federal lawmakers into those decisions that are best made at the state and local level.
All right, another excellent one to watch. Thank you so much for your time today, Representative Gaetz. Be well.
Thank you. All right. Sure.
All righty then.
I have a